Hi everyone. In assignment 3, we use different search engines that we've learned about to gather information about different journals. In this video, I want to walk us through the first of those journals so that you can kind of see exactly what I'm asking for, where to find it, and that, okay? So in the video, you'll see that I've got, am I pointing correctly? Yes. I have open a window for the UMS portal on our browser where we can go for the search engines, and I've got down below here a copy of assignment 3 open with the first journal that we're going to be researching. So let's go to, I need to kind of bounce around here. This is going to take a little bit. Let's go to Fogler Library. So I'm over in the portal, and let's find Fogler Library. There it is, right there in the middle on mine. So I'm going to open that up. Then I'm going to go to the databases, and the two primary ones we're using for this specific assignment are Cabell's and the journal citation reports. So let's start with Cabell's. So I'm going to go down. I'm just going to jump to C. We can see it's already a little alt. The color's a little different because I've opened it up before. So it's going to take us to Cabell's. Great. And then up here, I'm just going to enter the title of the journal we're looking for. So now I also need to pull up over here. The journal is the American Journal of Education. So I'm going to type in American Education. I'm going to hit return. And notice it's giving me a whole bunch of different journals, 38 to scroll through. And I could scroll through and find them, but part of the trick is that it's going to anything with American Journal Education kind of in the title or some key descriptors in that. So I'm going to change this a little bit and put it in quotes because I know that's exactly the journal title I'm looking for. So I do that, and it just streamlines things. Now I could have just scrolled through the long list. That would have been fine. But notice by using the quotes, and it says it's this specific combination in that order, it takes me right to the journal that I want, the American Journal of Education. So I'm going to click on this. It's going to open up information about the journal. So let's go back to assignment 3, and the kind of the first question we're asking about, who's the audience? So it says right here, here's the audience: academics, administrators, and practicing teachers. So kind of gives you a sense that it's kind of targeting everybody: the professors in ivory towers, administrators out there, and teachers. So it's covering a broad audience. Who's the sponsor? Now that's, as we see, that's typically an organization. It may be a UCD, it may be APA, it could be the National the National Grass Grower Hobbyist Association. Who knows? It could be any association. And here we see the sponsor, and the sponsor in this case is Penn State, Penn State College of Education. Now sometimes that's a little different that you don't get a lot of colleges of education sponsoring journals, but it happens sometimes. If you don't see a sponsor, then you can also, what I'm asking here, if there's no specific sponsor noted, who's the publisher? Because some publishers will generate journals on their own, and they're this publisher plus the sponsor. Now, sometimes that's because they're a predatory publisher just trying to make money, but not always. There's some excellent publishers, Sage, Elsevier, others, that are great, reputable publishers that will sponsor. Sage does some of the top journals. So if you don't see a sponsor, look up here, and here we see it above the title. University of Chicago Press is the publisher, but the sponsor is more important generally, unless you can't identify a sponsor. We'll see in a minute somewhere else we can get the publisher if no sponsors listed. Then let's scroll down a little bit. We're looking for the acceptance rate. So right here we see the acceptance rate is 12%. So pretty selective. That's pretty good. About 1 in 8 or so journal articles actually get in. That gives them the power to be selective. They can be picky and only publish the good stuff that they receive. It also tells you as a researcher, if this isn't a really good article, I don't want to waste my time sending it here because they're going to reject it. You only want to send your best stuff to journals with low acceptance rates. The next question is the review process. And we see it right here. Oops. It tells us that it is a blind review process. That's good. Though you're starting to notice some changes with that. Some new models are being tested that have been in place in other disciplines, but we're seeing them more in education and the social sciences, where it may not be blind, that you may publish something and people outside of the reviewers and the reviewer comments being published, the public can directly go in and make comments and to articles that are out there. So the process, but right now, kind of blind reviews are kind of the standard practice. And again, nice. There's benefits to it, but the world's changing a little bit, maybe. Launch date. Oops. The launch date is, let's see, where do we see that? Up here, 1892. And that's been out a long time. Journal's been around a long time now. Sometimes different sources may give you a different launch date because part of what's happened, a few things can happen. In the past, the name, it may be the same journal, but maybe they've changed the name. And so you may see two dates because, well, it used to be called this, and then in 1970, whatever, we changed the name to that. So they may list both, or one source may list the original launch date and another source may go with the more recent launch date. You may also see where the launch date, they may note that this is when it was launched electronically online, which will be much more recent. So you may see some differences from different sources and kind of recognizing that if it says, oh, the launch date was 2005, why am I seeing papers from the 1990s? Well, maybe it's because that source saying it's 2005 is talking about when it went online versus an electronic versus when it was strictly paper. So you may see some differences in launch dates. Let's keep going. Cabell's classification index discipline. So here what I'm asking for is the, let's see, the metrics. So we're going to go to metrics to see this. This is where we're starting to give you feedback on the impact that the journal has on the field. So we go to metrics. And so here we see Cabell's classification index. And notice there's 3 different numbers here. So I'm going to click on this and it's going to open up. Notice here it says the CCI classification index. And it has this cool little pie charty thing with different bars. And it's giving us 3 different disciplines because the same journal may be used by different disciplines, different subdisciplines, and have different relative weights. Maybe it's a big deal for this group, but not so big of a deal for that group. So this journal is really kind of touches on these 3 different disciplines. So for this question, when I ask the discipline, I'm asking you to tell me not the number, but are you kind of what's the closest of these disciplines to your work? Is it education, curriculum, and methods, educational technology and library science, or educational psychology and administration? And again, kind of notice it goes from 59 for educational technology and library science to educational psychology, it's a 72%. So different values for different disciplines, kind of their impact. And, so it's having more impact for educational psychology, less so for technology and library science. So for discipline, tell me which discipline you're doing, because different people may look at this, even in the class, some of you may pick that one and others pick this one, and the impact will be different. And then the classification index score, we're looking at this number. Again, higher percentage tells you it's having a bigger impact. The then altmetrics score. So here's the altmetrics score. We come back here, is a 30. So we can click on this to get a little bit more information. And it gives you information about how the altmetrics, remember, looks at kind of that broader impact that the journal is having, a lot based on social media. So you can see how many, this has an altmetrics score of 30, which is pretty good. And it's telling you that to their knowledge, it's got 29 Facebook mentions, 34 in blogs, 560 on Twitter. So people are tweeting about it. News stories, Wikipedia, videos, all sorts of other ways that information is getting out there. So there's your altmetrics score. Now, for both of these, I want to point out, notice up here it has a year, so 2022. So these are the numbers for 2022. Notice 2021, it's a little different. 2020, it may be different. So if you look at a journal and you see, oh, look, it doesn't have Cabell's for this year. Now, this is kind of odd. I wonder why. I don't understand why that would have happened. But sometimes they're updating the information. And it may not, it may default to 2022, but maybe some of this isn't available yet. Like the site index isn't available for 2022. So if you don't see the number, if you don't see one of these values for the year here, go back a year and look at the previous year. Now we see the site index. So, just kind of be aware that that happens. Alarm going. Okay, so if you're missing something, don't just throw up your hands. Change the year for the metrics. And you can kind of have a little fun there too, just looking at how the journal has changed over time. Okay, keep going. So that's the altmetrics score. Then the impact factor. Now, for the impact factor, we need, they've got, the sites index and that, but let's look at a different source to get the impact factor, because this is really, impact factors are used a lot or referenced a lot as kind of the common denominator when people are in different disciplines talk about the impact of journals. We often focus on impact factors. So we need to go back to Fogler. So I'm going to come back here to databases. And now we'll go to journal citation reports. And so JCR. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to do the same thing. Let's type in American education. I'm going to click on this. More information about the journal. You can see here. Now notice here it actually says, here's another place where it's saying here's your publisher. So notice if you kind of need to understand that distinction between the sponsor, notice they're not saying anything about the university that's the sponsor for it, but they're just saying here's the publisher, is University of Chicago Press, great university press. Okay, so the impact factors. So let's look here. Where do we get the impact factor? Scroll down. Go journal impact factor, 3.0 for 2021, 3.027. Very solid impact factor, particularly for education. They have an alternative one here of 2.919, which is without self-citations. A self-citation is where journals are citing themselves, and because they'll often do that. So impact factors, one way you could have a really high impact factor is make sure every journal article that you publish cites at least 10 of your own studies in your own journal, and you can inflate the impact factor that way. So if there's a big distinction between these two, you have to kind of wonder, what's going on? Usually it'll be fairly similar, a little lower if you don't count self-citations because you're counting fewer citations. Okay, and then here's kind of the trend over time. Here's the calculation, which is kind of nice. It's telling you how it's calculated. So, kind of the formula here for 21 citations in 2021, 2022 divided by the number of citable items in those 2 years. So you can see how many total citations do the articles that they publish have, and how many articles do they publish are citable. And what we mean by that is that sometimes a journal will have an article out that's really not going to be cited. It's an update on, we've changed our editorship or something like that. So you don't want to count those as journal articles that in the denominator, just the things that could be cited. So that's nice. It tells you exactly how they're doing, very transparent. Okay, so there's the impact factor, and there's lots more information you can see here. If you kind of really want to delve into it. But again, kind of the coin of the realm when we talk about the impact of journals is that impact factor. There's other impact factors that different groups will use. They typically come down to the same sort of approach, that formula that we've just seen here. The JCR, Journal Citation Reports impact factor, I think is kind of the widely seen biggie for that. Okay, then in a sentence or two, approximately 2 sentences, what's your impression of the editorial board? So to get that, we need to go to the journal homepage itself. And that, it actually may be here, but I know that from Cabell's. I'm going to jump back to Cabell's again because there it is. I just saw it at the bottom. It's on Cabell's, but you can Google it and find the journal as well. But Cabell's will typically visit the journal website. So I'm going to go click on that. Here it is, the American Journal of Education, and it's got more information. Notice they have their JCR impact factor because it's good. So they want to, if you've got a good impact factor, you want to tell the world. And even if you don't, you should still put it out there so people are kind of informed. So that's great. It's more information about the journal. We're looking for the editorial board. So let's kind of scroll around up here, probably under About the Journal. There it is. Editorial board. So let's take a look at that. And here's a list of the members of the editorial board. Now this can vary dramatically in terms of how people report it and what they consider the editorial board. Some will be very, very tight, and it'll just be who's the editor and the associate editors and nobody else. Others will have an editor, an associate editor, and an advisory board. Sometimes they'll list like everybody who reviews for them as one big glob, and it's kind of hard to say, to necessarily see who's an editor, who's an associate editor, and who's a reviewer. So kind of recognize it can be fluid in what you see. The editors, those are maybe one, maybe two, maybe a couple editors. Versus associate editors. Editors are like the ones responsible for the journal. It's their baby. They're responsible for everything, the day-to-day operations of the journal. Associate editors, here we see they have them as senior associate editors. Typically are, it's a number of people. I'm an associate editor for a journal. And you're responsible for, sometimes it's a content area. So if someone does a heavy statistical paper for this one journal, they send it to me as the associate editor to kind of be in charge. And you're in charge of individual papers that come along, not the whole journal, but there's maybe a set of the specific papers you're in charge of, and you find the reviewers, the people review it, you poke the reviewers if they're late, when the reviews come in, you put them together, you synthesize it, you send the letter out to the author saying, here's, good job, we're accepting it, we're rejecting it. We aren't rejecting it, revise the paper and answer the questions the reviewer said and revise it and resubmit it. It's a common people submit papers. You accept it, maybe accept it with some specific revisions. You may outright reject it. It's like, no, this doesn't, for whatever reason, it doesn't fit. It doesn't meet our standards, whatever, we're rejecting it. And other times it'll be revise and resubmit, which is, we're not rejecting it, but we're not accepting it either. We've noted these concerns, address them in a revision, and then try again. Okay, so that's the difference between the editor and associate editor. So they've got lots of associate editors. Book review editors, notice they've got some editors specifically for book reviews, kind of like I was just saying, you may have associate editors that specialize on an editor. Managing editors, kind of helping with the formatting, making sure everything gets out the correct way, and they have an advisory board. Now, for this, that's a kind of a lot of talk about the editorial board, but the editorial boards are important because it gives you a sense of, it can tell you a lot about a journal, the quality of the journal. If you're looking at that advisory board, are they coming for, or the editorial board? Notice the editorial board doesn't say where they're associated with, which is a little annoying. I'd like to know where their affiliations. They do for the advisory board. And do you recognize some of the names? Linda Darling Hammond, oh, big name in education. So that tells me right there, this is a good journal, because someone of her stature is not going to want to be associated with a crappy journal. So that kind of helps you. And you can see, just looking at the range of the universities that are involved, Penn State's great university, Columbia, great universities, particularly in terms of when you think of education and that. So the editorial board, they're who they are, and as you become more familiar with the literature, you'll start to recognize who are the big names, who are the ones that everyone seems to be citing for different topics. And do you see them on the editorial board? That's always a good sign. The affiliations. Do they come from good universities? Do they all come from the same university, or kind of a narrow university list, which makes you wonder kind of the breadth of a journal, if they're all kind of from the same place or the same, kind of same affiliations. Sometimes you'll see editorial boards that have lots of practitioners, and that tells you, well, this is really a journal targeting practitioners. Sometimes they'll have a mix, which is telling you they're kind of trying to hit both on a serious level. Typically, you won't see practitioners on editorial boards, but you will at times. Even academic, researchy journals sometimes. Is it international, which could be good, could be bad. Depends on the international, kind of how international, what's the other affiliations that you're seeing with it. If it's a journal and you don't really recognize it and it turns out, oh, it's from a small regional university, somewhere far away, how much of an impact is that journal actually having, versus you can have international journals that are associated with major international organizations, and they've got a great editorial board of leaders from all over the world. Is great. So again, it's kind of hard to evaluate the editorial board, but it's something that gives you a flavor, a sense of the quality of the work that's going into it, and the quality of the people running it will help to ensure a higher impact journal. Okay? So that is where you find everything for assignment 3. And now just do that. We've kind of gone through journal 1, and you just do the other ones, and you're all set. Let me know if you have any questions. Okay? Take care. Bye-bye.